All right, everyone. Hello. We're going to get started. So if everyone can take their seats, we're, trying to keep things running as smoothly as possible. So when we do run into technical difficulties, we have less of a hiccup. So welcome everyone to Radical Welcoming, Sensing, Questioning, and Reimagining Agritourism's Existing Arrangements. Our presenters today are Crystal B., Joelle Fontaine, Kenneth Bailey, Lori Lobenstine, Mari Omland. The first five are from the Design Studio for Social Intervention, and the Mari Omland is from Greenland Mountain Girls Farm. This is an hour-long presentation. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat if you're online. And I'm not sure how the speakers want to structure it. In the past, we've just had, if you have questions, you can line up by the microphone. And then when we have time for questions, we can just keep things rolling. Thank you so much.
Maybe it would be cool to first have our team raise their hands so y'all know who we are. We're really excited you're here.
Hey everyone, my name is Crystal B. I'm the Creative Civic Design Lead at Design Studio for Social Intervention. We're really excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much to Mari Omland, who invited us to be a part of this amazing event. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Lori Lobenstine, one of the co-founders of DS4SI, the Design Studio for Social Intervention, and welcome.
Yes, welcome to Radical Welcoming, Sensing, Questioning, and Reimagining Arrangements of Agritourism. So we want to start with this idea of welcoming. And so I'd love to invite you all to close your eyes and think of a time when you felt truly welcomed in a space. What was happening in that space? Who was there? What were people doing? What did the space look like? How was the furniture arranged? And kind of hold that feeling in your mind. Ooh, yes. And it could be any space. It could be a space that at any moment in your life that you felt truly, truly welcome when you were, it could be an old memory, something that happened today if you felt truly welcomed. All right. Does anybody want to share what came up for you? What space did you think of, or what moment did you think of that you felt truly welcome? Yeah.
So it was going into a friend's house. You walk into the kitchen, everybody's cooking, everybody's smiling, laughing, welcoming, saying, hey, come, putting us to work.
Okay.
Including us in everything.
I love that.
Just sorry, if you are talking, could you go into the microphone just so
Thank you.
So it was going into a friend's house. Everybody was right in there in the kitchen. They were cooking. They were drinking, I suppose we could say too. They asked us to come help chop the onions and just being involved in everything that was going on for a really great meal afterwards.
Awesome. What's your name?
Scotty Jones.
Scotty.
Yep.
Scotty, thank you. Anyone else? Does anyone else want to share a moment when you felt welcomed? Just one more. Yeah.
So mine really, I went back to my grandmother's house, coming in and again, always being invited to the table, always having somebody who directly looked at you and listened to you when you spoke and just, totally did everything to be sure that you were comfortable and that, you also always were well fed. My name is Dorothy.
Dorothy, thank you. I like that food is present in both of these.
Sorry.
My name's Dan, and real quick, it's funny. It's my grandparents' house, and food is involved. There's good smells coming from the kitchen, basically.
I love it. I'm sensing a theme. We're in a room of foodies. I like this. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. Did anyone else want to share? Okay, yeah,
My name is Joelle Fontaine, and my memory is very recent. Yesterday on the farm, I feel like that was so we were on Maury's farm yesterday, and I've never been personally on a farm. So it was my first time learning about all these new different plants, tasting them, picking them, and then actually coming around and creating a meal together. Again, a meal theme, right? There was this like air of non-judgment, it didn't matter what I knew or didn't know, it just felt like home. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I just want you to hold these thoughts of how, when you felt truly welcome, we're going to kind of look at break down what are the particular situations where we truly feel welcome, and how can we recreate those? How can we investigate those and make sure that folks feel welcome when we're doing, or when you all are doing agritourism?
So we had the good fortune of coming out with a book based on our framework, Ideas, Arrangements, Effects, right when COVID hit. This was a framework that we're gonna think about together. It was something that we thought about a lot. The design studio was founded in about 2005, 2006. And as we look back over our work, we really realized how much of our work was framed in helping people think about arrangements. And so let me say why. We think about how ideas are embedded in arrangements, which in turn produce effects. So we just talked about some of the effects, right? Feeling welcome is an effect. And sometimes we'll chase it right back to the idea. Like we chase it right back to the intent of welcoming. All the reasons why we want to welcome people to our farms or our communities or our homes, whether they're friends or future friends. But ideas are embedded in arrangements, and those arrangements produce effects, right? And those arrangements can really fall from view. They become so automatic that we don't think about them, right? So you all already pointed out how often in welcoming, the arrangements are based on food and eating together. Our first person who shared talked about the arrangement of working together, right? So we'll be thinking today about how ideas get embedded in arrangements, sometimes with intention and sometimes without, right? There might be ways that I am welcoming you, how my grandmother welcomed me to my home, and you're like, why is she running up on me and hugging me? Like that might feel really too much, right? So we're going to start to dig into these arrangements.
And so one of the ways that we talk about ideas, arrangements, effects is through a classroom. Most of us have been in a classroom exactly like the one on the left at some point in our lives. And this is a really ample way for us to show this idea of ideas, arrangements, and effects, this sort of theory. So
We're in that arrangement right now.
we're in that arrangement right now. You all, yeah. You all are literally experiencing this arrangement. And so what are the ideas that are embedded within this arrangement? Also, this podium. What are the ideas that are embedded within this arrangement? What do you all think? What are the ideas that are embedded within an arrangement where there's someone talking at the head of a classroom? Y'all are in rows, kind of listening quietly. What sort of ideas are embedded within this arrangement?
Hi, Phil Holstead. Control.
Yeah, control. One person has control.
Sarah Halstead, I was going to say the same thing. One person is talking at everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a authoritarian, like there's a leader and a follower.
Mhm. Thank you.
I think it's a passive arrangement, whereas a circle is a more active participatory arrangement.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Yeah.
Can I put a little brighter pitch on that?
Yeah.
I agree with all those things, but I also want to say there are ideas about knowledge. Because you know what, recently I was in a Zoom workshop and I was so excited that people who knew more about disability justice than I did talked to us the whole time. I was so grateful I didn't have to get in a breakout room and talk to someone else who didn't know anything, right? Like there are ideas about knowledge, right? That sometimes the person in the front of the room has something that we want to learn. And then in the second one, of course, this idea that we all share knowledge.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's beautiful. Yeah, that learning is unidirectional, that the person at the front of the room has the knowledge and that we are talking at you, which is happening now. But it creates an arrangement. These ideas create arrangements that are embedded in these arrangements, and then they thus produce effects. So in a classroom, if you were in a classroom like this one, you might not, if you're a little bit more shy, you might sit in the back of the classroom, you might not raise your hand as much. You might not feel like the content has to do with you, and the teacher at the front of the room might not know if you're absorbing this information. It might be harder to tell. But when we're in a circle, it is a little bit more active, like someone over here said. Everyone gets a chance to talk. We're all making meaning together. And you might hear something from someone else in the classroom. It's not just coming from the knowledge isn't just coming from one direction. It's coming from all of your peers and all of your classmates in this scenario. So this is just highlighting how ideas are embedded within these arrangements, and they produce different effects. So even if you're like a hyperactive child in the classroom, this situation where you're just supposed to keep quiet and sit still, that might not work for you. So that might produce an effect where you're constantly getting in trouble, say. Yeah. Let's.
Oh, she's just doing my.
Okay.
Sorry.
We tagged out.
I also think it's fun to share this here because in both of these arrangements, people are still sitting in chairs, right? It's still a passive, we're sitting and learning from each other. Whereas a lot of you all, that learning from each other is very active because it's on a farm, it's on a tour, it's doing things. So we wanted to break down each of these terms. What do we mean by ideas? We think about ideas as both big and sturdy. Racism, sexism, classism as some of the ideas. Xenophobia, some of the, even colonialism, some of the big ideas that we are often struggling against. We do a lot of work with social justice practitioners. You could think about agritourism as a big idea, but we think about how racism gets embedded in arrangements that produce effects, at times intentionally and many times unintentionally. And some of that is because ideas are also small and tricky. We could be working in organizations that are actively trying to be anti-racist, and we might still have ideas about who is to be trusted or what welcoming looks like, right? We might still have ideas about what hardworking looks like. I think I'm hardworking. When someone works like me, I think they're hardworking, right? That is still one idea of what hardworking is, right? So these small and tricky ideas can attach themselves to racism. And as we think together, we could think about if agritourism is a big idea, what ideas about travelers are embedded there? What ideas about work? What ideas about economy, right? So we can start to unpack some of the other ideas that are embedded in this new-ish notion of agritourism. Does that make sense? Does anyone want to stop us before we continue?
I'm trying to wrap my brain around what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm Sarah. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around that. And can you go
Sure.
30 seconds further? Help me.
Yeah. So I'll use a couple examples from this morning's plenary. You know, it was really important to Maria when she went to South Africa to realize that she and many Ugandans were assuming that tourism was for people from outside of the country. And she went to South Africa and saw tourists that were from other parts of South Africa. So that was an assumption that she was making about who tourists are, right? That was attached to her ideas about what agritourism could be or what tourism could be, right? So like that, you know, like those little things, you know, there was somebody who was so used to farming cacao that he had an assumption that everyone knew what that bean looked like. He didn't think that was a particular value, right? And so when Mario and his farmer friend realized that this actually was a lot of value and people were super interested in it, that changed something in terms of how they thought about agritourism. Does that make more sense?
I think we have to also it gives me a pause to say, we have to be careful how we frame this, because really at the core, we want to do is farming. Agritourism is a way for us to farm, in my mind. And so if we look at this as agritourism, then does farming become important or not? Is it relevant? And so we have to be careful how we frame the big idea first. and what then supports agriculture in my tourism supports farming. So just an example, in our area, my mother and grandmother picked cherries. But today, people coming up to our area, they don't think of people hand picking cherries because they shake them. It's a big process. It's a monoculture versus a polyculture with people hand picking and hand labor. So that's the framework. Is you have to be really thoughtful on how you want to frame your design.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we learned so much from Mari is how much she's thinking and rethinking and hoping other people will rethink their ideas about food, right? Even rethinking their daily lives and going to she'll never go to the grocery store, right? That blew our minds.
Hi, I'm Myrna, and something I am continually trying to wrap my brain around is the concept of ownership of land. Who can land be owned? And I know this is, it's really, I'm really struggling to think about it from all perspectives.
Thank you so much. That's huge. Can we move on to the next piece? Do people feel like with those examples that was helpful? Thank you all so much.
So as we're thinking about some of these bigger ideas, we're also thinking about how those ideas are embedded within arrangements. So if we're taking the farm, thinking about what are some of the arrangements within that. And some arrangements are hard and some of them are soft. And for hard arrangements, we're thinking about how is the space physically arranged? Like what is the physical infrastructure? What is the entrance? What is the landscaping? How do people come into the farm? How do they find the farm stand? What is the signage that's there? Those are the hard arrangements. And when we think also, let me back up a little bit. The reason that we use the word arrangements is because it lets us know that arrangements can be rearranged. So it's something that's been designed, and because it's been designed, it can also be redesigned. So that's why not me, I didn't choose this word. Lori and Kenny, that's why Lori and Kenny chose this word of arrangements. And so arrangements are hard. Some of them are the physical things that you can see, that you can touch, that you can feel. And some arrangements are soft. And those soft arrangements might be how you welcome someone into the space. So your grandmother greeting you at the door, the different interactions, also the ways that people find out about your farm. Did you create strategic partnerships with businesses in town? Do they see a sign on the road? What are the ways that you're interacting with them or with people that come and visit? And also arrangements can overlap. So there's many arrangements that are present in a single space. So that's what we're thinking about with arrangements. Those bigger ideas that are embedded within these arrangements, which then produce effects.
Thinking about the cherries and your grandparents, right? So the physical change, the machine that can shake cherries, changed so many social arrangements in terms of people's ability to get paid for their labor of picking cherries. Right. So those things are always overlapping and at play. And then down the line, you're in a place where so many people don't know how to pick cherries. Right. And then, so it just continues, if that's helpful. Effects. Arrangements produce effects. Sitting in chairs, right? Those chairs are arrangements. Those rows are social arrangements, and they're producing effects. Depending on what you had for lunch, that might be producing an effect, sitting in a chair. We're looking at some signage here. There are probably some real effects to that beautiful Green Mountain Girls farm sign that you can walk under, you can take pictures with, these lovely hand-painted signs in the farm stand. There was thought to the fact that that is a hand-painted sign. There's thought to the fact that that was wood picked on the farm. But there are concerns among farmers about having people who don't know how to farm on their farms. What if they get hurt? What if they run in front of a sheep or a cow? Or what if they chop their finger when they're cutting salsa? We have this beautiful idea of being able to work together, right? So there are arrangements that are policies and practices. And we have in many states and brand new in Vermont, what
well, particularly, I mean, in American culture, we have the soft arrangement called suing. It's very popular. So the farmers are worried, right? So maybe we have a prevention. We now have a law that you can't sue that farmer. They won't lose their farm if you get hurt on their farm. So there was some thought put into that soft arrangement, but it's having a lot of effects, or it could. It's brand new. We don't know, right? The effects could help farmers step into agritourism, right? Because they might feel like they're less at risk. But if you look at that sign compared to those signs, the effect that it might have on your visitor could be very different. Like, I mean, I barely got here and they're telling me if I die, I'm like, I don't want to think about dying, you know, like Mari had us moving some sheep. If y'all come to the farm tomorrow, you're gonna be moving some sheep and they'll have that sign and you'll think, what's gonna happen? So I want to, we're handing it over now, right? Yes, we are gonna hand it over to Kenny and Mari and pick it right up at Green Mountain Girls Farm and sort of think together in a sort of case study fashion.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kenneth Bailey.
And I'm Mari Omland.
And earlier today, I was aging myself, or what's the proper term? Because I said, dating myself, because I said, I'm going to be Phil Donahue. Does anybody get that reference?
Be Oprah.
I'm our Oprah for the contemporary crowd. And I'm going to ask Maria a couple of questions and then open it up. The first one, you want to say anything about yourself before I ask you a question, or you want to just jump in?
I grew up 2 hours south of here and I'm thrilled you're all here.
So Maury, you've heard us talk about ideas, arrangements, effects. You've read the book, you saw this presentation that we just did. How does this framework make you think not only about your farm, but what you bring to agritourism as a person who's thinking intentionally about creating experiences, as a welcomer? How does this framework inform your practice, and how does it help you think about what you bring to the table?
It's fundamentally empowering, I think, just for me, the few slides that we just had, the few examples we just had, just remind me of how a little tweak can be really meaningful, and that just one person or one farm or one conference, one meeting, 1 week could really shift and create a bigger change. I feel very empowered. I'm prone to that.
And what's one thing you would want one sort of thought or reflection or question you would want other people who are thinking about their own agritourism business to take from this framework, or from thinking systematically or using systems thinking in general around their practice?
I just had this crazy late afternoon thought. So people in the room that know me, I have tangents, but I sometimes talk about queer privilege. It was the luckiest thing ever when Laura and I got our civil union.
Did you say queer privilege?
Queer privilege.
I love it.
So just that all of a sudden it was 2001 and we're going to have this ceremony. And, my little 4-year-old nephew was like, but who's going to wear the white dress? But no one else knew what to ask or what to say. And no one was telling us what to do, except my mom was like, you can't have all those people come all this way and not serve them meat. Okay, that was a big tangent, but
we'll take it.
There's some beauty in the margins. There's something that you can see for like openings. And so what is that arrangement that if we see ourselves mad at, the food system or something that we're part of that needs to change, how can we free ourselves up from the heavy weight of expectations of something like a traditional marriage? How can we free ourselves up to just see a way through? I don't know. Help me get back. These guys are professionals.
This is perfect. This is perfect. I'm gonna take the mic and I'm going to run out here. Oh no, Letta's gonna volunteer to run around. So I'm gonna open it up. We had a couple of reflections for Mari. I want to hear your reflections. You can start with you. How are you making sense of the framework? And how does it make you think about it?
Well, I am hoping that you can, how did you all connect? This is like really interesting to me. And can you give us some more information about the work that you do and how you do it together?
Okay, so Lori and I have known each other. Kenneth Bailey again. Lori and I have known each other for over 20 years. I used to be an organizational development consultant for ages, a good, I don't know, like 15 years before I started the studio. Got tired of that, did a residency at MIT, learned about design thinking, decided I wanted to apply it to social justice, social change. We decided to invent a methodology that made more sense for social justice than the classic way of thinking about design. And 15 years later, here we are. That's the quick story.
And then to add to that, a deeper layer, Lori and I showed up in 1987 in Nairobi to study together on a study abroad program. We've known each other for the 35 years since. And so someplace in there,
Agritourism, or the first one was, how does this ideas, arrangements, effect framework make you think about the work you're doing back at home? And then the second one was, blindly distributed through the things that we gathered in our context, and we have no ideas how to read those intentions that have been spatialized or sort of organized in rooms or in our lives. And so what we were trying to do with this book is to sort of bring us back to things that have often become second nature to us, to say, do these things match our intentions? And if so, good. And if not, how do we take agency over, manipulate, or struggle with them? Thank you. We have a hand here.
So do you have any suggestions for how to recognize that you're swimming in water, that we all have our own lens that we view the world in? And, you know, it's when, to me, the most obvious thing is when you're, haven't been in a wheelchair or with someone in a wheelchair, you are often oblivious. I have been oblivious in the past about what it is to have an accessible environment. And so are there any things you can suggest that we can ask ourselves when we don't have some outside occurrence that helps us learn what it is to be someone viewing the world of a different race or different ability?
I think I think it's useful to invite people to do that work with you, where possible. It's similar to, like, as a person that often works in the arts, I'm often invited into circles as an interlocutor to help people think about their art pieces as a crit. What would it be like to have people come and go through an experience and give it a good crit, and based on, you know, how welcoming is it, or things you don't see? Like, I think it's worth learning in that way. The same, like, importing that kind of practice from the art world and bringing it into other contexts as a way to get those insights. I think yeah, we are often in our own water, and the techniques to have people point to things that we don't see. So that would be my advice. I saw you snapping, Andy. I'm gonna put you on blast. What are you thinking?
I just love the concept. I come from a fine art background, but I'm in economic development, sustainability, agriculture, things like that. But I think bringing in that idea of critique and creating a structure for really inviting productive dialogue and critique that is more than good, bad. And especially, I think in doing some of my work, some of the things that I've learned is, before you, for example, from the disability community, before you would, as let's say, the National Park Service, if you were a park manager, say, our parks are accessible, you would bring somebody in from the disability community, walk with you, have an open invitation with a mode of inquiry to say, how do you experience this? And be ready to sort of practice listening. And then the other piece is, it's okay to ask for input when you don't understand. I think it's okay to be vulnerable and say, I don't know how to do this. Help me on my way, but be ready to hear what you are told.
And
Yeah.
a big chunk of what we have to learn as people who are trying to design is to figure out how to distance the thing or the situations that we're setting up from our own personality. The way we often talk about is don't call my baby ugly. And it's like when we're creating these situations, the question we're trying to ask is, how is this situation playing out for you? And trying to figure out the distinction between the situation and yourself as a practice. Did you have something you were thinking about that?
Well, I don't want to.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
It's inchoate, what I have to say, but I just have to say I appreciate your group and what you're doing and thinking, and it's really amazing. This conference is ranging from like extremely granular to what I think we're talking about here, which is really telescoping way out and trying to think about using these, like, I'm not a design person, but I appreciate using like kind of those concepts to think about farming and agritourism. It's really interesting, and I'm trying to apply it to our own situation, which is a sheep farm in Connecticut. And we have it, essentially at the end of the day, that's a monoculture. But we're also trying to conceive of it as, getting the sheep to help us manage the land and creating silvopasture areas of permaculture. And, how can we, intentionally pick different, plants to keep and, use the sheep to keep invasives down. I think we're trying to think about our sheep rather than just like our one monoculture product of the farm, but instead like a partner in land management and land stewardship. So I'm not really sure how it applies to this.
Go for
I think I know how it applies. I mean, to me, like your story, there's so much intention there and the layers and, it gets a little technical or whatever, but then it goes back to our grandmothers. How many of us, I had my grandmother's kitchen. I haven't thought of that kitchen in a long time. This opening exercise, thank you, Crystal, brought a bunch of us to our grandmothers. I think it's about excitement. It's about passion. It's about, really feeling stuff. And when I think about we can label that monoculture, but it sounds like your pastures are becoming increasingly diverse. And so we can also label it celebrating diversity and using your sheep as a partner. And so I feel like we're also in some of our reaching back. I think, there's a big, maybe for me, a call to action that we layer our expertise into this. And really, Myrna, you were talking about land ownership, but really the land and our grandmothers are still our teachers as we walk through. And, when you guys were ready to be welcomed by me, all I was my gregarious, passionate, bubbly, whatever, rambly self. Geeky, whatever. Anyway, so it maybe is also just a reminder, try to
we used the word mindset last night at dinner. And I'm like, we got to be careful and tame, our chance of like being scared of labeling ourselves something like a monoculture when it sounds like you have so much passion for these other things, and just get our mindset towards celebrating that partnership with the sheep and healing land. And and hopefully some of you can come tomorrow. We're just at our little farm, we're trying to change the fact that all of humanity is eating from the top 6 inches of earth. And we're making particular mechanical interventions that are followed by particular biology that should enable us all to eat from 6 feet deep and be drought resistant and better nourished. And, so a small tweak in the type of equipment we're using, a small tweak in the way we're labeling ourselves, a small tweak in who we're playing with, it could make a really big difference.
One thing I was thinking too is like, how might this conference sort of serve as an opportunity for people to gather practitioners in case your farms? Like just invite some people out and say, this is where we are. This is what I'm thinking. Here are my hesitations. Here's where I want to go. And like case your farms, you know what I mean? Like it's like we do it quite often as a part of the practice in the design world. Like what would it mean to make that part of your community of practice? There's a question.
This is bringing it down a little bit lower than what you guys are talking about. But I had 2 different comments. One was about this signage here. So having the hand painted sign that Green Mountain Girls, and then you have that warning sign. I have the same thing on my farm with that warning sign. And some things we can control and some things we can't control. And so for us in Oregon, we have to have our signs in a specific place. The letters have to be a specific size. And I have had guests make comments about it before when they've come, and we just kind of talk it through a little bit. And so then that goes to also people maybe who come on your property with disabilities, or we get a lot of autistic kids that come, a lot of families. And maybe the parents will introduce that to us, or maybe we'll just kind of notice that things are a little different. And it's mostly, I say, also listening to your customers and listening to them say, hey, you know what, Johnny really needs to have it be like this. And I'm like, okay, we can absolutely do that. So I think our guests can teach us also about the things that they need to have us do if we are not perceiving it, or we're maybe not quite acting the right way. And I think it's being open to that and not taking it personally, more like taking it as an education. Okay, well, we can absolutely do that. I can absolutely make sure that kid can brush that horse, because that's the one thing that's going to calm him down. So I think we have a huge opportunity on our farms to learn from our guests as well, what they need.
I'm going to piggyback on that, and I appreciate that because so we have a you pick orchard. We have sweet cherries, and we handpick everything. It's 100% handpicked, whether it's you picked by our customers who come in, or ourselves, or crew. If we have too many, and we need to be able to. The handpicking, yeah. So when Phil was talking earlier about the tarts get shaken because they can, it doesn't matter if they're damaged because they always get processed. Tarts are frozen or dried or whatever, and they don't have to look nice. Our cherries go to the fresh produce section of the market. For instance, when you buy your cherries those are usually sweet cherries. And so a lot of people have been apple picking, a lot of people have been blueberry picking, but not many have picked cherries. And so we have an opportunity when people to come in, they're often hesitant. And they're like, but we've never picked cherries before, kind of like, I hope that's okay. And we want people to know that most of the population has never picked cherries, and that we have the tools. We'll tell you where, how, what, and how to pick. And there's a tension in that model, because what that means is we hire college students, and we talk to every single family that comes into the barn, and we say, here's who we are. We get you set up with the buckets, the right size that you want. We say, we're going to show you where to pick and how to pick a cherry, either stem or stem on, or without the stem. And it just, it goes against the conventional wisdom of just send them out with a bucket. Just here, take your bucket, or go get it from that table over there, whatever. And we're also working to figure out how to allow people with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities. And this is my husband's spearheading, intellectual, physical, emotional disabilities. And we've had people come to our orchard, and we've got stories that we could tell, and he's got a poster. So come visit us. We're looking for ideas, but we started with we have a dear friend whose family has many deaf people in the family. And I'll let you take it from there. But I mean, we're still learning. We're first generation farmers. We didn't start till years ago, a couple of years ago.
Well, let me just start with, there are no disabilities. So one of the things we learned is that if you are blind, it's not a disability, it's your life. And so that's a change of framework for me. And so the element is, well, what could I learn from you? If you do not have eyesight, what can I experience that you experience that I don't? Because my senses are so jumbled on so many other things. And when you take a look at that, then you realize, well, those people may be different. If you're queer, you're going to look at our farm differently than me. If you are blind, you're going to look at our farm differently. So how do I have always a mindset to embrace this? And I'll just finish this, is we have speakers coming like TED Talks, and one of them was on dark skies. And what blew me away was when the speaker said that a third of people who live in urban settings. In urban settings, darkness is danger. So when they come up to reside in these rural areas, they want lights. They want lights on all over, because darkness is danger, instead of embracing the darkness. And I didn't understand why people put lights on when they come to a rural setting. Now I do, but we want to change that, right?
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I really love this framework. I am not a farmer. I work with farmers. I work with tourism professionals, and a lot of what we talk about is storytelling. And I think this is such a great way to think about critically, constructively, the stories that we tell about the people that we work with and for. Actually thinking about like each of those steps when we tell those stories. So thank you for this tool and this discussion. I appreciate it.
So I think this conversation, it brings me back to, we kept talking about our grandmothers, right? And what our grandmothers knew and saw is that they showed up in love, and they were able to accept people for who they are. So a lot of the things we're talking about, disabilities and land ownership and all of these things that take a lot of intentionality, it really takes being human first, right? So what would it look like for you to have dinner and invite some of your friends who are blind, right? And have them take you through the farm and explain to you, what do they feel? What do they hear? What do they sense? What are they smelling? And how can you enhance that experience for them? We were having this conversation with Mari yesterday, and the question was, when somebody comes to the farm, what do you want them to walk away with? What is the experience you want them to have? And I think that's a question for you to really start with, right? Where it's like, okay, what is the end product? And then how do we create it with intentionality? And intentionality looks like inviting folks that don't think like you, that don't see like you, to the table and treating them like a friend. It's not like a, it's not like a survey, right? Or a focus group. It's really like having a dinner, and really having that curiosity and wanting to learn more about who they are, explaining who you are, and creating that friendship, that partnership that you can now create a space that is welcoming for all.
And not to, well, to add one more layer, right, onto the grandmothers. We talked earlier about it being both and, right, a hard arrangement and a soft arrangement. And I would be not me if I said that if we didn't acknowledge that our grandmothers did come with all this sweet stuff, right, and this welcoming stuff, and that is an arrangement, and we want to replicate it. Our grandmothers and grandfathers also sometimes came with some hard stuff. That was an arrangement, and we get to rearrange it.
I like what she said about taking the telescope out from this. When I think of the systems of agriculture, I'm an academic, right? So I have my very different worldview about how the different layers, whether you talk about policy, you know, at a government level, or even policy at an NGO level, to the academics that are, you know, supposed to be providing a certain level of knowledge so that we don't all have to go and learn this individually and reinvent the wheel, kind of down to your county cooperative extension office. You know, there's all of these layers, and figuring out how to find ways to have them work together is almost overwhelming to me, especially when we're talking about things like inclusion, because not only are there so many different levels, each level has their own agenda, their own accountable for effects, and they don't match as you go down or up or across these chains. And so, you know, if we could, you know, and I don't even know what my question, if there is a question, it's just, yeah, it is just this you know, sincere want to break down some of those barriers so that the policy is providing the tools that people need to be successful in their business, that the academics are providing the information that is needed. And all of these can work together in different ways. And I don't know.
Assemblage, like, you know, what's the word? Quorum sensing, when all of a sudden just the right things occur, and then it all comes together. So we're looking for just the things to start matching up, like a nice puzzle coming together, and then we just have a few pieces to put together, but it probably isn't going to work like that. It's probably going to be a really big mess. And then all of a sudden, in that rip that shank put into the ground, there's an oat. And the oat makes a relationship, a mycorrhizal relationship with fungi. And there was also a chicory, and that's going to go 6 feet deep. And that brings water up, but it can't share the water without that, you know, fungal assemblage that's coming. So for me, someplace in there, we pick a root that's healthy, from a healthy living soil. And that is not a bare naked root. You can't see the root. It looks like dreadlocks. It's an assemblage. Everyone came, and they came almost overnight after that seed was planted with a little inoculant. And so I think we have to just keep putting the inoculant out there, hope the rain comes, not like it just came. Thank you very much. We needed the rain, but that was ridiculous power wash, you know, so we'll wait for the right rain and the right seeds. And we just got to keep putting our seeds out, dropping the inoculant, a dash of Kenny and Lori and these guys. Yeah.
I was going to say something to how do we sense the arrangements that we're in, right? When they fall out of view, and remembering Beth this morning, one of the kinds of visitors that we learn from a lot are little ones, right? Like that little one reminded her that she was surrounded by dirt, and that was amazing, right? That he hadn't had that experience. And so I just say that because as we thought about the framework, and as we wrote the book, we really thought about 3 elements. One is, how do we sense existing arrangements? How do we intervene in existing arrangements, right? Which you all are doing quite a bit. And then how do we imagine new arrangements? So as we think about arrangements, just giving you all back those 3, you're sensing them, you're helping people sense them. There's ones that you're helping people really care about and intervene in. And there's ways that you're imagining new arrangements.
Oh, anybody online have questions?
We were talking earlier about the arrangement that is already being broken into, right, or rearranged with agritourism. Did you want to?
Yeah. So thinking about the work that you all do, the arrangement of food systems, a lot of people get their food from a grocery store and they have no interaction with the people that grow their food, or they don't see how, I actually don't know what a cherry tree looks like. So the thing that you're giving people is this closeness to the system of their food. So that's already a disruption of this arrangement, this larger arrangement that so many of us are a part of. And you all give that gift. And I think that goes back to what Joelle was talking about of starting with the effect. What is the effect that you want to give to people? What is the gift that you have where you are giving that, you are helping a little, or like bringing a little boy closer to dirt and he's having such a good time, or you're teaching someone how to pick cherries for the first time and showing them what that's like. I was like giggling while Mari was talking because there were so many moments when we were on her farm where you would geek out, Mari. really would be so passionate about the systems that I wasn't even aware of. I think all of you are aware of systems and arrangements within food. Like you have that deep knowledge. And actually you're going to be showing people how to sense those arrangements and helping them rearrange that or helping them see those effects. So I just want to thank you all for doing the work that you do.
Yes.
The issue on all this is it's really hard work. And there's huge systems of friction to prevent this. So one of the ideas we tried this year was, what about partnering as a labor pool between restaurants who consume the food and farmers who grow it? Because a lot of times, instead of like, this is my employee, I'm gonna arrange your schedule, why not partner with someone who could say, hey, in the mornings, I need a lot of help, but in the afternoons, I'm free, and have a different work cycle where people then interns, college students, whoever could come in and like see this whole dynamic. So difficult to implement, very difficult to implement, because the framework friction is my employee, I'm tight on time, I got control. And so the point is, this takes a lot of work to reimagine, and really for us ourselves to see internally, what are our motivations and are they true to where we want to go?
Hi, I'm Ruth Pepler. To piggyback on what you just said about the chef, and the chefs, we've been inviting chefs on our farm. We do a big event where we try and get the kids to cook, and we're really doing basic. Iris, I don't know if you were there for a cast iron cook-off, but it's just a whole different thing. We're bringing these chefs in. So they came in and I brought them through our morning routine. So we have a dairy and we hydroponically grow our fodder for the cows. So we brought them in there and they were looking at this and they were just like, this is all going into the milk, like they got to take that and then they went to go feed the cows and they hand fed cows. And then they went upstairs and we cultured buttermilk. And then we turned around and we showed them some of the things that we make with the buttermilk, and then we gave the buttermilk to them and let them be creative with it. And they were making sauces and things like that. So for them to, but this is like years. I mean, we're talking like taking steps backwards to make those introductions and not expecting instant change. We're expecting education. So, people ask us all the time, especially when you're filling out a form on your farm, they're like, what's your product? I say educated guests, educated people are our product. And it's like, that's it. But it's a years in the making. And then when we're starting with this agritourism, and you're starting with something new and you're bringing people in to do something that they've never done before, this is like the grassroots movement of trying to re-educate and reset that mindset that has been just ingrained in the last 2 decades. You've got 2 generations of people that are stepped away from the farm, and you've got to kind of start all over from scratch, because it's like they're coming in. I'm getting grandparents coming in saying, I went to my grandmother's farm. I'm going like, wow, okay. And your grandparents already, and you're here with your grandkids, but they're all sitting at the same milk stand, milking the cow in the morning, so you're making these huge trickle effect connections, but it takes so much time.
I want to piggyback on that, and I'm no expert on spatial justice, but 95% of US farmland is owned by white people. So we might be that many generations away, but we're, some communities are farther away and there's loads of layers in between, but we should keep that in mind.
Just to kind of sum up what I think you were talking about, one of the things about being in the business of education is that you have job security. because there's always a new generation and they don't know anything, right? And so when you walk away from the product, you know, the cherries to use as an example, or the goats, and you consider yourself in kind of the education business that can be profitable. Yeah, you have job security in so many ways.
I think we have time for one more insight or observation, and then we have to turn it over to thank everyone.
I'm Ellen. As you talked about food systems and about how reimagining food systems, I think also here agritourism is reimagining tourism. When you think about the agreements of what a tourist is and how you engage in a tourism experience, I think that everything that we're talking about here is not only in a food system reimagining how people understand where their food comes from, but also what they are as a tourist and how they benefit from those experiences.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, let's give it up. That was an awesome presentation. Thank you.